Imagine you've been using a highly complex piece of software your entire life. You use it every day, you know the menus, you've memorized all the shortcuts.
Right, you're perfectly comfortable with it.
Exactly. And for as long as you had it, you've been told it's just a personal wellness app. Something you use quietly on your own to center yourself.
Just a private tool.
Yeah. But then, one day, you look at the original source code and you realize it was never meant to be a personal app at all. It was actually designed to be this massive statewide operating system meant to run an entire society.
I mean, that changes everything. You aren't just looking at, like, a few updated features. You're looking at a complete paradigm shift that redefines what the system is even for.
And that is the exact scale of the shift we're diving into today. We are unpacking a really fascinating piece of source material that proposes a radical reinterpretation of Islamic practices.
A heavy one.
It is. Specifically, it contrasts the traditional ritualistic prayer known by hundreds of millions as namaz with what this framework argues is the original intended concept of salat.
But before we jump into the code, we should make a quick note to you, the listener.
Definitely.
The text we're analyzing today touches on some deeply held historical and religious practices. So our mission here isn't to judge, take sides, or criticize anyone's personal faith.
Right. We're not endorsing or debunking this.
Exactly. We are simply acting as your guides to explore this incredibly provocative framework, just to see how its internal logic operates and to understand the historical claims it makes.
So let's start with the physical objects people use. When you think about worship, in almost any tradition, there's usually some kind of repetitive meditative practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in this context, that brings up prayer beads.
Right, the tasbih. In widespread practice today, tasbih involves using a beaded rosary to, count repetitive chants or praises.
It's a very quiet, personal ritual.
It is. But our source points out a really striking historical discrepancy regarding those physical beads.
Oh yeah, what kind of discrepancy?
Well, according to this text, the beaded rosary didn't even exist in the Arabian region during the life of the prophet, or even a century later.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The claim is that these beads appeared roughly 200 to 250 years after his death.
Wow. 2.5 centuries is a massive gap. So if they weren't part of the original practice, how did they become so universal?
Basically, cultural osmosis.
Yeah.
The text asserts that these beads were actually adapted from the practices of Christian monks in Syria.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they were gradually absorbed into the culture as the empire expanded and interacted with different traditions.
But that raises a massive question. If the physical beads and, the practice of counting chants didn't exist originally, what did the Quran mean when it repeatedly used the word tasbih?
Right. To answer that, this framework goes back to the Arabic root, yusabihu.
And I'm guessing that root doesn't translate to counting beads in a quiet room?
Far from it. The text argues that when the Quran describes the sun, the moon, the earth, and the birds as doing their tasbih, it means they're utilizing their full, God-given potential to execute their assigned duties.
Oh, wow. So it's active.
Very active.
Yeah.
A bird's tasbih isn't a vocal chant. Its tasbih is the act of building its nest, hunting for food, raising its young gun of birchi, just playing its precise role in the ecosystem.
Right.
And the sun's tasbih is providing light and heat, according to the laws of astrophysics, is the active fulfillment of a design.
So to use an analogy, a car engine's tasbih would be running perfectly on all cylinders, firing at exactly the right time to move the vehicle forward.
Exactly.
It's not just sitting idle in the driveway humming a pleasant tune.
That's a great way to look at it. It's a dynamic, action-oriented concept.
It really makes you wonder how something so vibrant, something so tied to actualizing your potential, got shrunk down into a passive physical action.
Yeah, it's quite the downgrade.
Sitting and clicking beads feels like the opposite of moving the universe forward.
And that observation actually cuts to the absolute core of our source material today. The overarching argument here is that active societal duties were historically replaced by passive personal rituals.
Which brings us to the monumental distinction the text draws between namaz and salat.
Exactly.
Because most people use those two words interchangeably, right?
Yeah.
You ask someone if they've done their namaz or if they've done their salat, and you're asking the exact same question, have you prayed?
Right. Today they mean the same thing to most people.
Mm-hmm.
But this text splits them into completely different universes.
Okay, lay it out for us.
It defines namaz as ritualistic worship, something based on personal devotion, emotional attachment, and spiritual absolution.
Okay.
In fact, the author makes the bold claim that the concept of worship or ritual, as we commonly understand it, like in a purely spiritual passive sense, is not a Quranic concept at all.
Man, that is a heavy claim. So if namaz is the personal ritual, what exactly is salat?
Salat, in this framework, is defined as a state-led administrative system.
The state-led system.
Yes. It's built entirely on the rule of law and strict obedience to societal commands in everyday life. Think back to the bird or the sun fulfilling their roles.
Right, the active duty.
Exactly. In this system, every person has their salat, which translates to their concrete duties. If you're a parent, your salat involves your obligations to your family's welfare.
Okay, I'm tracking.
If you're a clerk in an office, a judge, or the head of a state, your salat is flawlessly executing your job description, ensuring justice, and upholding the social contract.
So it's basically a framework for rigorous civic responsibility.
Totally.
But I can see why a society might drift away from that. I mean, executing your real duties, like actively refusing a bribe when you're struggling to pay rent, or standing up for justice in your community when it's unpopular, that is incredibly hard work.
Oh, it requires constant, exhausting vigilance, and that brings us to what the text calls the shortcut.
Human psychology naturally gravitates toward the path of least resistance, right?
Always. The argument here is that namaz, the passive ritual, became universally popular precisely because it's much easier to perform.
Sure.
Doing a set of physical rituals 5 times a day to get a clean spiritual slate is a highly appealing shortcut compared to the grueling work of fighting societal corruption.
It's the equivalent of an employee who, misses every deadline, ignores their complex projects, and messes up the accounts, but makes a point to bring the boss a fresh cup of coffee 5 times a day.
Yes.
And they genuinely expect a promotion for their devotion.
It's a perfect parallel. And the text takes this a step further, exploring the societal consequences of that shortcut mindset. It actually argues that replacing the system of salat with the rituals of namaz increases crime rates and corruption.
Wait, how does that mechanism work? Wouldn't praying more theoretically make someone more mindful?
You would think so?
Yeah.
But the text points to a psychological loophole. When people unconsciously believe that their wrongdoings, their bribes, mistreatment of workers, hoarding of wealth, are simply wiped clean by performing the next ritual, it removes the friction of accountability.
Oh, I see.
The original system of salat was meant to enforce tangible accountability. When you replace that with a ritual that grants automatic absolution, the structural deterrent against bad behavior just collapses.
That makes a lot of sense. But if salat is this vast active system of civic duties, somebody has to be running it, right? You can't just have a society of people loosely deciding what their duties are. There has to be a manager.
Exactly. A system of civic duties requires an administrator. And the text is unequivocal about this establishing salat. It's purely the job of the state.
The state.
Yes, it is the responsibility of state administrators, not religious clerics, and definitely not private religious organizations.
I have to admit, that raises a massive red flag for me. Having the state dictate moral and religious duties sounds a lot like a theocracy. It sounds almost authoritarian, like the government policing what's in your heart.
That's a very natural reaction for anyone living in a modern secular framework.
Oh.
But we have to look at how this specific text defines the boundaries of the state's role.
Okay, clarify that for me.
It is not about policing personal faith, spiritual belief, or what happens in your own mind. It's strictly about managing a framework for civic law, public action, and societal welfare.
So it's about actions, not beliefs.
Right. It's about ensuring the streets are safe, the poor are fed, and contracts are honored. Historically, the source points out that the pulpit, the minbar, was not a religious altar.
Wait, it wasn't?
No, it was a state platform. It belonged to the ruler or the state representative to address the citizens about community affairs.
Okay, so if the minbar started as a platform for civic administration, how did it end up in the hands of religious clerics delivering spiritual sermons?
According to this text, we have to look at the historical hijack that took place during the early Islamic empires, specifically the Umayyad and Abbasid eras.
The Golden Ages, basically.
Yeah, these were periods of massive geographical expansion and incredible wealth accumulation. The rulers of these dynasties wanted to live in luxury. They wanted to build vast palaces and enjoy their power without the heavy, grueling burden of establishing rigorous societal justice.
So they outsourced the job.
Precisely. They essentially handed the minbar over to a newly created, professionalized religious class.
Wow.
By doing this, The rulers neatly separated religion from state administration. The state could do whatever it wanted, hoard wealth, wage wars, while the religious class kept the public busy with rituals, theology, and personal piety.
It's a brilliant, if cynical, political move. I mean, keep the masses focused on the exact mechanics of how to wash their hands before a ritual so they don't ask why the state treasury is empty.
And the text argues this specific division led to an endless stream of fatwas, religious legal rulings by scholars, because the actual state had abandoned its job of providing unified civic law.
So just fractured.
Exactly. The faith was fractured into sectarian divisions based on man-made interpretations, while the core operating system was just abandoned.
Okay, but if the state had kept the system running, what exactly would their job description have looked like? Does the text give a concrete list of responsibilities?
It does. Citing Surah Al-Hajj from the Quran, the framework lists 4 interlocking duties for the state.
Right. What are they?
First, establish Salat, meaning maintain this administrative system of duties and assemblies. Second, give Zakat. Third, enforce good. And fourth, prevent evil.
I want to zoom in on that second duty, zakat, because the way this source redefines zakat completely upends how it's understood today.
It really does.
Most people know zakat as a pillar of individual charity. You know, you calculate a small percentage of your savings and you donate it to the poor or a charity of your choice. It's a private act of giving.
Right, but within this administrative framework, Zakat is an individual charity at all. The text argues that Zakat is a mandatory state-managed tax. It is to be systematically collected by the state, specifically from the surplus wealth of the rich, and then strategically distributed by the state to provide for the needy and build societal infrastructure.
So it's basically a centralized wealth tax.
Exactly. And this next point is crucial under this system. You absolutely cannot collect Zakat from the poor or the struggling middle class.
Which makes sense mathematically. If it's a tax on surplus wealth, you can't tax a deficit.
Exactly. The text views taking this tax from someone who barely has enough to survive, not as an act of piety, but as an act of oppression that contradicts the entire purpose of the system.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. If you look at how these 4 duties interlock, the state establishes the system of duties, which is Salat. It funds the society by circulating surplus wealth, Zakat.
Right.
And those resources give the state the power to actively enforce good, like building hospitals and schools, and prevent evil, like maintaining a fair justice system. It's a complete civic engine.
Okay, so we have this state-led engine focused on civic duty and taxation. But what happens when the people actually gather?
The assembly.
Yeah, because if I picture a traditional prayer service, I picture very specific synchronized physical movements. Standing, bowing, kneeling. If this is an administrative town hall, the traditional image of everyone lining up in rows facing a wall doesn't seem to fit.
And that's precisely why this text completely reinterprets those physical movements. It claims that the traditional physical bowing, known as ruku, and prostrating, known as sujud, are simply not in the Quranic description of Salat.
All right, let's break down how this framework views the physical postures, starting with qiyam, the standing position.
So in the traditional ritual, the congregation stands facing a specific direction, and the prayer leader, the imam, stands at the front, also facing that same direction.
Meaning the leader has their back to the congregation.
Right. But this text argues that in a true Salat assembly, the leader stands facing the people.
Which is just basic communication 101. If I'm a state official addressing a town hall, giving instructions or explaining new laws, I need to look my audience in the eye. Giving civic orders while staring at a wall with my back to the room makes zero logical sense.
Right. Then we move to ruku, which is traditionally the physical act of bowing with your hands on your knees.
Okay.
The source argues this word is entirely metaphorical. It means mentally and intellectually accepting the truth. When the text commands society to bow with those who bow, it's talking about collectively submitting to the rule of law.
So it's an agreement to the social contract.
Precisely.
I see the distinction. Like, an individual bowing alone in their living room might feel spiritual, but it achieves nothing for the society's structural integrity. A society bowing together means they agree to stop at red lights, pay their taxes, and not steal from each other.
Exactly. And finally, there's sujud, the prostration, which traditionally involves placing your forehead on the ground.
Right, the deepest physical bow.
The text interprets sujud as surrendering one's heart and mind to a command. It is the act of saying, I have heard the instruction, and I fully commit to executing it.
Okay, but how do they prove that's metaphorical?
To prove how metaphorical this is, the framework points to a very famous, yet logistically puzzling, historical example found in Surah An-Nisa of the Quran.
Oh, the battlefield one.
Yes, it describes a scenario where troops are commanded to perform salat while actively on a battlefield facing an enemy.
I was trying to visualize this when I read the material, and it's a complete logistical nightmare.
It really is.
If you follow the traditional interpretation, you have soldiers on a front line wearing armor, armed with heavy weapons, and trying to perform a synchronized physical ritual.
Right.
If you physically drop to the ground in a full prostration, putting your face in the dirt while strapped with swords and shields, you are completely blind to an enemy ambush. It's a tactical disaster.
It would be suicidal in a combat situation. But look at how the text interprets that exact same battlefield scenario through the lens of Salat as an administrative system.
Okay, how does it play out?
It describes one group of armed soldiers stepping forward to face the commander. The commander, who is standing, delivers their orders, the tactical strategy, the vital instructions.
So the commander is doing qiyam.
Exactly. Then the soldiers accept the orders, meaning they perform the metaphorical sujud. They intellectually surrender to the command.
Got it.
Then they step to the back to guard the perimeter, while the next group comes forward to receive their briefing.
That is fascinating. It turns a chaotic, vulnerable moment into a highly organized, dynamic military briefing. Stepping forward, receiving the battle plan, committing to it, and stepping back to execute. It fits perfectly.
It's one of the strongest examples the text uses to argue that Salat is about instruction, duty, and execution, not physical postures.
So if we have this active state-led assembly where citizens stand to receive civic instructions and collectively agree to the rule of law, the mechanics of how it's organized matter.
Absolutely.
How does the state coordinate this? Like, when do people know to show up?
That brings us to the concept of Jumu'ah and the call to gather. Most modern translations render Yomul Jumu'ah strictly as Friday.
Right, the Friday prayer.
But linguistically, the source argues it simply means the day of gathering. It doesn't strictly have to be a Friday. It could be whatever day the state administration determines is most effective for the society to assemble.
So it could be a Sunday, a Wednesday, just whatever fits the economic and social rhythm of that specific community.
Exactly.
And what about the call itself? Because the broadcasted call to prayer, the adhan, is instantly recognizable today. You hear it echoing from loudspeakers all over the world 5 times a day. How does that fit into a state-led gathering?
Here again, the framework presents a massive divergence. The Quran uses the word nudiya, which simply means a call, an announcement, or proclamation to gather the people.
Okay.
The source points out that the traditional adhan, with its specific melodic phrasing that we hear today, was a later historical addition.
It wasn't in the original text.
No. In fact, Islamic historical traditions themselves acknowledge that the specific wording of the adhan was based on a dream had by one of the prophet's companions, not on divine revelation found within the Quranic text.
Wow, that is a critical distinction. So in this system, the state simply issues a civic announcement, the people gather on the designated day, and the leader stands facing them.
Right.
When the leader speaks, what exactly are they delivering?
During this gathering, the leader delivers what the text calls zikr. Now, in traditional translations, zikr is rendered as remembering or chanting God's name.
Right, it evokes an image of people sitting in a circle, quietly meditating or rhythmically repeating holy words.
But I'm guessing you can see where this is going.
Yeah, I'm guessing the source takes issue with that translation.
It takes major issue with it. The source argues that translating zikr as remembering or chanting in the context of salat is an academic betrayal of the original meaning.
Strong words.
Very. Within the framework of a civic assembly, the text argues that zikr actually means advice, instruction, or a reminder of the law.
It's incredible how changing the definition of just one word shifts the entire gravity of the event.
Doesn't it?
Translating zikr as instruction instead of chanting changes it from a quiet, inward-facing meditation circle into a dynamic, highly relevant town hall meeting.
Dealing with current events, civic duties, and societal challenges.
And that shift in energy is the exact tragedy the source is trying to highlight, isn't it?
Exactly. By slowly altering the vocabulary over centuries, changing tasbih from fulfilling your potential to clicking beads, changing zikr from civic instruction to chanting.
changing ruku from a societal contract to just physical bowing.
Right. The entire operating system was systematically dismantled.
Okay.
A robust, state-led framework designed for justice, welfare, and civic duty was replaced by private, personal rituals that leave broader societal corruption completely unchecked.
Let's step back and look at the whole engine we've just unpacked. We started by redefining the vocabulary, seeing tasbih not as a rosary, but as the active fulfillment of our ultimate potential.
A huge shift.
We explored a massive paradigm shift, looking at Salat not as a daily personal ritual for spiritual absolution, but as a rigorous civic administration of duties.
Right.
We examined how the state's role was historically outsourced, leading to a focus on personal piety over societal justice. And we decoded the physical movements, understanding ruku and sujud as a society's collective intellectual agreement to follow the rule of law.
Perfectly illustrated by that battlefield strategy.
Exactly.
It's a framework that really challenges you to look past the surface of centuries-old practices. It asks fundamental questions about how language evolves, how history is written by those in power, and what the true purpose of a societal operating system should actually be.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a broader philosophical question to chew on.
Let's hear it.
Building on the core premise of our source material today, that true devotion is about actively fulfilling your societal duties rather than relying on passive rituals. Let's look at our own lives, regardless of our individual backgrounds, secular or religious. Are we, as a modern society, too focused on the rituals of being a good person? Think about it. We post the right hashtags, we say the culturally approved words online, we perform these highly visible, performative acts of goodness.
Modern rituals.
Exactly. But while we are busy perfecting those modern rituals to keep our social ledgers clean, are we ignoring the much harder active work?
That's the real question.
Are we neglecting the actual difficult execution of genuinely fulfilling our duties to our community? Fighting for equitable systems in our workplaces and actively taking care of the vulnerable people right in front of us?
It really comes down to the difference between constantly updating your status on a personal wellness app and actually doing the grueling, necessary work to fix the bugs in the societal operating system we all share.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, exploring completely different perspectives, especially the ones that challenge everything we thought we knew about history and language, is the ultimate way to stay well informed. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the surface level, and we'll catch you on the next one.